Today, I'm bringing you another exclusive and this time top secret access to information document that details how Liberals were considering relocating Syrians to Canada who had already moved to Europe as refugees. As we found out in earlier access to information investigations, the majority of the Syrian migrants that Canada was receiving were what immigration officials called urban refugees. They weren't refugees from refugee camps in the most dire of situations. They were instead, for all intents and purposes, already living safely in places like Turkey or Lebanon, settled in cities, living in apartment blocks. But those were the Syrians who were then walking into UNHCR offices and asking to come to Canada. Now, last week, I did an access to information investigation series that detailed the failures of Canadian immigration officials to screen these refugees for security risks. Adult children weren't interviewed separately from their parents. Some 150 refugee case files didn't have the adequate number of security checks done. 39 case files didn't have any security screening done at all before they landed in Canada. And we discovered that no police background checks were required, either from the home country of the refugee or from the country that the refugee was claiming asylum from within. The whole thing was a dangerous mess. And today I have another exclusive access to information document that is marked secret, and this thing is going to blow your mind. It's a memo prepared for the immigration minister by immigration bureaucrats. It reveals how Canadian immigration officials were considering bringing in Syrian migrants who had already resettled in Europe but were now under the threat of deportation from Europe back to their home countries. Imagine our current crisis at the border, but instead of refugees walking across the border from the United States into Canada, they could just hop on a flight from anywhere in Europe where they had been living for several years and just claim asylum. Here's the access to information document. As you can see at the top here, the document is indeed labeled secret. Now, there's no date on the document, but there are some things from within the document that allow us to guesstimate the approximate time frame and the minister for whom it was prepared. We know that it was prepared sometime after August 31st, 2015. From the last paragraph, while Syrians are the particular focus of the current crisis, there are refugees in Europe from multiple source countries who share the same prospects for local integration and protection needs. For instance, Italy has received more than 120,000 migrants so far in 2015. Okay, did you notice that even these officials acknowledge that these are not really refugees, but rather economic migrants? Again, the top 5 countries of origin of migrants arriving to Italy as of August 31st are Eritrea, nearly 26,000, Nigeria at 12,000, Somalia at 7,500, Sudan at 5,500, and Syria at roughly 5,500. So August 31st, 2015. And there's usually a month or two lag time between when these statistics are collected and when they're available, which means this document was likely prepared for Justin Trudeau's first immigration minister, John McCallum, in late 2015. Now, what the document says is truly, truly shocking, though. But let me go back. We learned last week that normally for refugees coming to Canada to qualify to become a refugee, there has to be no reasonable prospect within a reasonable period of a durable solution in a country other than Canada. There must be no ability for voluntary repatriation or resettlement in their country of nationality or habitual residence, or any resettlement or offer of resettlement in another country. So you can't have resettled in another country and made that your habitual residence and then become a refugee to Canada. That's not how it works. You just can't go around country shopping. But this memo to the new immigration minister said that an immigration officer can now consider bending those rules for applicants if the risk of deportation to the country of origin was present, if the applicant has a well-founded fear of persecution in the country of refuge, and they could consider whether or not the applicant has access or likely to have access on a basis similar to the nationals of the country to the labor market, property, rental housing, public health care, social services, and education for children. Now look at this crazy paragraph here. Traditionally, Canada has not settled many refugees from Europe, particularly EU member states, because they have been regarded as providing refugees with a durable solution. While volumes of resettlement applicants in EU member states are currently low, recent visa officer decisions for privately sponsored refugee cases processed in Malta and Greece found that local integration is not available for specific refugees in either of those countries. Interpretation here. Greece and Malta weren't giving migrants enough free stuff the tax-paying nationals were getting too. The memo goes on. The refugees that make up the EU vary somewhat with respect to their economic development and capacity to respond to refugee needs. Furthermore, the willingness within these countries to respond positively continues to fluctuate with respect to the ongoing influxes of refugees, which include large numbers of both Syrians and non-Syrians. So if the nation's locals have basically had it with a bunch of migrants storming their border, what Canadian officials called not responding positively to the migrants, Canadian officials were willing to step in and take these migrants to Canada. If Greeks wanted to deport fake refugees from Eritrea, these officials were going to make it Canada's problem now. This is frightening since many European countries will often take anybody who storms their borders and then resettle them and give them the most luxurious of welfare benefits. What I mean to say is, if European countries didn't want these specific migrants, there's really something wrong here. These migrants should probably be the last migrants that Canada wants to resettle, but these officials thought that Europe just wasn't being nice enough and kind enough and tolerant enough and generous enough with them, and so Canada should come along and pick up the slack. In the meantime, Yazidis were not able to get into Canada, nor were persecuted Christians from the region because they couldn't even attend at refugee camps to get their names on the UNHCR refugee list. Because, as I reported in 2016, Samaritan's Purse officials testified before a Canadian immigration committee that the Muslim UN refugee camp workers were discriminating against the Yazidis and the Christians who resided in those camps. Liberals were going to take refugees from Cologne or Berlin, while Christians were being killed and genocided, and Yazidis were being sold like livestock into sex slavery. For the Rebel.media, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. Silicon Valley and big tech has a real thing for censoring us conservatives. But at The Rebel, we have a way around that. We have our own Rebel Media mobile app. It's available on the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. Download it, give it a try, tell us what you think, and help us fight big tech censorship.